There are some prominent Republicans that are now added to the list of possible presidential contenders. Sign up Texas Governor Rick Perry. He's saying he's considering it after months of denying any interest. We'll have to wait and see. And former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani and former New York Governor George Pataki also saying they might be mulling a campaign run. Could this help light the GOP fire, or do Republicans still need to go shopping? David Drucker, staff writer for the Capitol Hill newspaper. Roll call. If it were only that easy that you could order up a candidate on the internet. So much goes into this, David. Thanks for joining us with your perspective. When Governor Perry says now, I'm not interested in being president, I'm thinking about it, is that a game changer?
Not at all. I think that Governor Perry has been urged in some circles to run because among some Republican primary voters, they're looking for a more provocative, more forceful advocate, if you will, for conservative policies and for somebody who hasn't been shy about criticizing President Obama. But I really don't expect Governor Perry to run. This sounds to me a lot like what happens when somebody doesn't want to run, but so many people start asking them that they say, okay, fine, I'll consider it, I'll think about it. And then we find out, really, they didn't want to run, they're not going to run. And I think with Governor Perry, it's important to note that two of his closest political advisors are working for Newt Gingrich on his presidential campaign. And so I don't think anybody in Perry world really expected him to run or thinks he's going to run.
Interesting, because he is a long-serving governor who has never lost a race. Let's talk about some of the others whose names have just come up in the past week, so many from New York. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani and former New York Governor George Pataki. Do they have what it takes?
Can I yawn on television? Is that acceptable? I think in all seriousness, Governor Pataki is probably thinking about it because it's something he always wanted to do, and maybe he thinks that the field is weak enough to give him some room to play. I think with Mayor Giuliani, the only problem is that in 2008, he turned out to be a very weak-performing candidate despite his national notoriety that I think is very well-deserved and his strong leadership of the city of New York, and he has a great record there, and yet he could not translate all of the fundraising and all of that and all of his post-9/11 leadership into a significant amount of votes in that presidential race. I don't see why he'd be able to do it this time, especially considering he's, in some ways a bit of a moderate Republican. And it's questionable right now how successful a moderate Republican candidate could be in the 2012 primary.
I imagine that Rudy Giuliani will be very visible as we look toward 10 years after 9/11, which he is often associated with the aftermath of that horrible tragedy. But you raise the fundraising issue, which is interesting because when you look at someone like Ron Paul, and the grassroots effort that he was so successful in the past in getting attention, but not successful in terms of winning a race for president. Any difference this time?
I don't think so, and I think you have a number of candidates in the race, or potentially in the race, whether it's Ron Paul or Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann from Minnesota, Herman Cain, who may be able to raise a lot of money, may be able to score a lot of points at the debates, and yet it's unclear whether these are going to translate into a significant number of votes in the key primary states, in the Iowa caucuses, in New Hampshire, South Carolina, Florida. You have to not only get a lot of coverage from people like me, but you need votes. And so I think for some of these people, the jury is still out. They might be able to accomplish things that some of us aren't expecting. But Jamie, you hit on the key point. It's all about votes and not about necessarily the buzz. And I think there are things we don't know yet, but I'm very skeptical that people like Ron Paul are going to be able to translate attention to votes.
But it doesn't sound, David, like there's anyone that's really got you excited enough to write about them yet. Is there a name that we haven't heard yet that you want to throw out there as a possibility?
Well, first of all, I've written just about all of them, and I think they're all interesting characters in their own right, and I think a couple of them can win the nomination and are capable of beating President Obama if things align, if they run a good campaign, if the economy doesn't sufficiently recover, if people are unhappy with the president's leadership.
Which ones, David? Because which ones do you think can beat President Obama?
Well, I think Mitt Romney and Tim Pawlenty both have it within them to do it if they were able to garner sufficient support, run smart campaigns, and present their strength to the American people in a way that sells. I think they could do it. And I think even Newt Gingrich, who I don't think can do it, is such an idea factory in terms of the thinking that he brings to the table, that he'll be a very interesting candidate. I don't think you need a white knight, and any white knight candidate that people are thinking of, whether it's Chris Christie or Paul Ryan or anybody else, they're going to have to go through a campaign where people look into their background and trash every vote and everything in their record that ever existed, and they're not going to be as good at the end.
And not that you trash, but folks like you will be looking very carefully, and we'd love to have you back again, David, to talk about anyone new in the race or those who stay in. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, James.